Over 20 years ago, the world was blessed with a monumental video game starring a cartoon mascot beloved by all. Created by one of the most revered development studios in the industry, this is a game that fans of all ages can still enjoy and a game that holds up even today.
But enough dragging this on, you all know what game I'm talking about. I'm talking about Rare's Mickey Speedway USA!
Released on November 13, 2000 in the US, Mickey Speedway USA is a kart racing game starring Goofy and friends and... What? Super Mario what?
Alright, fine, I'll talk about the f***ing scary piano game that doesn't even have go-karts in it. Whatever. People only want to talk about Super Mario 64.
No!
No one ever wants
God!
to talk about Mickey
Damn
Speedway
it!
USA. It's like Mickey Speedway
God!
USA doesn't even
Damn
fucking
it!
matter.
Super Mario 64 is a game that needs no introduction. No, I'm serious, this game really needs no introduction. It's been discussed and dissected by people much smarter and more articulate than myself dozens of times here on YouTube.com. We all know it's a game that revolutionized what games can be, a pure distillation of fun and joy and everything that makes Nintendo so great in terms of their creative output and absolutely nothing else. A 3D platformer that all future 3D platformers would be judged off of. Even my beloved SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom isn't safe. That game rocks, but Patrick can't even long jump, so it's worthless. Basically, Super Mario 64 is Super Mario 64. But it's the last month that we're legally allowed to celebrate Mario's 35th anniversary, so I wanted to mark the occasion by sharing my past and present thoughts on all three games featured in the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection for the Switch. These aren't going to be massive reviews or retrospectives or anything, just some of my opinions and individual experiences with each of the three. I'm not IGN or whatever, okay? I'm just some dipshit. You don't have to agree with anything I ever say, I promise. And because these games are all very personal to me, please allow me to start this talk off by sharing a bit about... myself?
Sorry.
Let's travel back in time. Super Mario 64 and I were both born in 1996, meaning we are forever bonded by blood. The game was released on the Nintendo 64, the first video game console I ever had. See, my dad's friend handed us down his old one around the time the GameCube was releasing, and with it, a copy of the very first game I ever played, Madden 99. I did not understand how to do Madden 99 as a kindergartner, and even though I never saw any other controller at that point, the N64 still managed to terrify me. So my first impression of video games was that they were weird and confusing, and seriously, why did the controller look like that? Thankfully, a little while later, my dad grabbed us a copy of Mario 64 at a swap meet, and thus, I was able to start playing a game that actually made some sense to me. I ended up rocking out with this game for hours and hours at a time, even though I absolutely sucked at it for the most part. I just kinda liked running around, and controlling Mario became second nature after a while.
Being bonded by blood does that to you.
I liked blasting out a cannon straight to my death for no reason. I enjoyed punching and kicking the bystanders. I was delighted when I discovered shell surfing. I had tons of fun doing everything except completing the actual game. As I said, I sucked at it. I especially remember my sister having to help me beat Bowser each time because I couldn't time the fucking spinning right, okay? Leave me alone. I also died a lot. Tall mountain. Anyway, real life wasn't always fun for me growing up for a variety of reasons, but when I played Super Mario 64, none of those problems mattered. It was a happy place game for me for sure, a game I could just sink into and enjoy the simple act of existing in, and it was largely thanks to its absolute focus on player freedom. Looking at it now, all of our massive newfangled open world video games have definitely normalized that feeling of freedom in bigger and more elaborate contexts since then, but I'd say that Super Mario 64 nailed it pretty much perfectly over 20 years ago, entirely thanks to its controls. Mario can side flip, long jump, crawl around like a big baby, awkwardly bounce off of walls, and so much more. Like, you can definitely walk all the way up a bomb battlefield if you want, or you can just kind of do this and then a little shimmy and boom, save a few extra steps right at the top. And the game is full of these little moments where you're just allowed to flex your own skills, and it leads to an experience where you're encouraged to have your own fun while you're completing each task. That's what kept me coming back to the game time and time again as a kid. Super Mario 64 just made me feel happy during my formative years, but I'll admit that I didn't continue playing it religiously as I got older. It's been quite a few years since I've gone back to it, so to be able to play the original game portably for the first time was an absolutely incredible experience. And when I say portably, I'm not talking about 3D All-Stars, by the way. No, I'm talking about the 3DS version, bitch! Let me explain. When I say 3DS version, I'm not talking about Super Mario 64 DS. I am never talking about Super Mario 64 DS. That re-release, which features new stars and characters and minigames and whatnot, always bothered me a bit growing up. Unlike a lot of other people, I didn't hate the movement being mapped to either the D-pad or the touch screen. The D-pad and run button combo work fine enough, and of course it's even better on the 3DS's circle pad, but neither are as natural as the stiff as a rock N64 controller stick. No, what I really didn't appreciate was how Mario's moveset was divided up between several characters, two of which, Yoshi and Wario, I did not enjoy controlling at all. And I was especially turned off by how washed out the visuals looked. Don't get me wrong, the character models and assets and stuff look noticeably better on the DS, and it's not an ugly game, but I am a stupid purist at heart, so it was just not my preferred graphical style, especially in terms of some of the color choices. So I'm not saying it's objectively worse at all. In fact, it's probably the definitive version of the game in many ways, but it's just not my cup of tea personally. So no, again, I'm not talking about 64DS, I'm talking about the bona fide finger-licking Super Mario 64 3DS fan port! Quick context, pretty much throughout all of 2020, there were pretty heavy rumors that a 3D Mario collection was coming to the Switch. I almost immediately rejected those rumors because I couldn't imagine Nintendo selling a re-release of Mario Galaxy for anything less than full price, but all the hubbub at the time gave me quite a hankering to play the old games again, especially 64. Then one day I was perusing through Reddit and I found out that some capable individuals managed to get the original Super Mario 64 running on the 3DS via emulation. I'm not normally one to bother emulating games out of pure laziness more than anything, but I just wanted to play it so badly after the months of rumors, so I did.
Please don't tell Nintendo on me!
I played only a bit of the game on 3DS, which was a bizarre experience, taught myself how to backwards long jump after all these years, beat the final boss, and had a hell of a couple of days with it. Sure, there were some frame rate hiccups, and I was beginning to recognize quite a few flaws that I hadn't really noticed before, but I figured, hey, this is just the classic game I know and love on a smaller screen. I was just happy to finally scratch that itch I'd been building up. Fast forward a couple of months, and Nintendo finally announced the 3D All-Stars collection that I truly thought would never happen. Sure, there wouldn't be many quality of life upgrades, and sure, Mario 64 was only 720p in docked mode, and sure, they didn't even bother to go in and improve any of the game's cameras, and sure, it turns out that they were literally just emulating the games themselves, but I was excited nonetheless. And then I booted up 64, and after only a very little bit, I jumped right over to Sunshine. Which finally brings us to today, Super Mario 64 in 2021 on a shiny modern platform. I hope I've made it abundantly clear how much I love this game. It means so much to me on an emotional and nostalgic level. It defined my early childhood in many ways and introduced me to my love of video games as a whole. But playing through it again as part of a full-price collection just opened my eyes to how this old dog of a game is honestly getting pretty tired now. The more I play Super Mario 64 today, the more I just can't ignore its shortcomings anymore. The absolute biggest disappointment for me is when I realize that movement simply isn't as precise as I remember it being. There's a lot of slipperiness, and any type of tight platforming makes everything grind to a complete halt. Wall jumps do not work like 80% of the time, same with side flips. Trying to rotate Mario ever so slightly is much more of a death wish than it has any right to be, and overall controlling this guy just feels clunky more than anything else. It works, don't get me wrong, it definitely works, but not as well as I wish it did. But then we move on to the levels. The levels, as large as they can be and as memorable as they are, often force you through the same tedious activities again and again and don't push their ideas to their fullest potential. Just one example, the Haunted Mansion level has you fighting Big Boo for 3 out of the 6 standard star missions. Sure, each of the 3 fights are the culmination of a different situation. The first one has you murdering a bunch of Boos first, then the second one has you murdering a bunch of Boos first, but this time on a carousel with a cool creepy song playing, and the third one has you doing a bit of platforming up to the mansion's roof, which adds to the challenge by having you fight high above the ground. Other levels, such as Tall Tall Mountain and Tick-Tock Clock, expect you to trudge up the same vertical climb again and again and again. Music repeats itself far too much, coins aren't visible when they're more than like 2 feet away, and oh my f***ing god, the camera! Look, I totally recognize that these aren't new or unique complaints, and I'm aware of the fact that this is an old game that pretty much created its whole genre, so of course it's gonna have some problems, stupid Anthony, but I never realized how persistent these issues really are in the game. Super Mario 64 features 15 levels in addition to Peach's Castle, which serves as the game's central hub. Actually, let me focus on that for a second, because one aspect of this game that has aged quite gracefully is the incredible hub area. Peach's Castle is just about perfect at what it's setting out to be. It's large without feeling aimless, full of all sorts of fun little secrets to find, it expands very gradually and consistently, and overall it just feels really good running all around this beautiful little McMansion. It's never a chore getting from one level to another, and it has a real sense of place, almost as if it could exist in the real world. It might still be the best 3D platformer hub world of all time. I will say that I personally prefer Mario Sunshine's Isle Delfino a bit more, but even I can't act like that one is quite as effective and flawless as the castle is. Getting back to the topic of levels, let's glance at them one by one. Bob-omb Battlefield, excellent starting area, various tasks to complete complete, nice and wide and forgiving to get you comfortable with moving around, but I wish that 1 star wasn't locked off by needing the wing cap. Whomp's Fortress, not as good. This level features 2 incredibly stupid stars in the form of the dumb breakaway wall and the incredibly strong owl, but this is just such an iconic level, so I can't be too mad at it. Jolly Roger Bay, no thank you. Cool Cool Mountain, probably my favorite level in the entire game. Lots of unique activities, and it's fun to murder the baby penguins. So things start strong, but then get gradually worse from there. Big Boo's Haunt, like I just said, you fight the same giant boo 3 times, but this one isn't bad, and I appreciate the atmosphere and real sense of dread. Hazy Maze Cave, this level is not my favorite. I find the aesthetic to be boring, and the level kind of feels too big. I get that they're going for the whole sprawling maze thing. I mean, the level is large enough that they threw in its own map. A map that provides no real help at all, but that just makes for an area that's kinda fun at first, but becomes a slog to get through by the end. Lethal Lava Land, I enjoy the concept of this one, but f the volcano sections, and the red coins are just kinda sitting there. Shifting Sandland, I am not too big into desert levels in Mario games, and this is definitely not a worthwhile one. I find the objectives to be pretty tedious overall, and I hate the sand that one-shot kills you if you so much as sneeze by it. Getting inside the pyramid is neat, but it features one of the absolute worst stars in the entire game in the form of the secret coins that are so cryptically hidden that it becomes incredibly irritating to find them all, and there's only 5 of them! Dire Docks, no thank you! Sorry, to be fair, the docks in Jolly Roger Bay aren't actually bad, but they're levels that heavily feature swimming, which is a mechanic that I simply do not care for in this game. Snowman's Land, why? Cool Cool Mountain does everything so much better. This level is fine, but even though I get that it was probably designed to make the most of the game's assets, it feels very throwaway, and I always forget that it even exists. Wet Dry World! Wet Dry World is so cool and features the incredibly neat water level mechanic. I wish the rest of the game did more stuff like this overall. Once again, Tall Mountain. Okay, actually, I kind of like Tall Mountain now, but it's really tedious how many times you have to climb up to the top. The name of the level has the word tall in it twice. Nintendo knew what they were doing when they made us deal with this bullshit. Tiny Huge Island is a really cool idea that ends up feeling lazy more than anything else. When you're small, the areas feel too big and empty, and when you're big, you can just kind of stomp around and it feels trivial. But again, this is definitely a cool idea and features some fun stars. I just think the execution is lacking. Tick-Tock Clock, love the whole clock stopping thing, and this one is so iconic, but this is a vertical level with an emphasis on tight platforming, and when you fall, you almost always immediately die, so no! And last, and certainly close to least, is Rainbow Ride. Rainbow Ride is an irredeemable disease of a level. It is one of the most boring, slow, and obnoxious parts of the whole game. So in retrospect, we got 15 levels with just about all of the good ones being bogged down by repetitive tasks and an unfortunate lack of variety, and quite a few stinker levels to boot. Look, I get it, the Nintendo 64 was basically a toaster with RAM, and not even one of those fancy 4-slice toasters, but that's my whole point. While this game is definitely a product of its time, looking at it from the lens of today, and especially when Nintendo feels comfortable reselling it as is as part of a larger collection, it just feels pretty bad. I will say, where Super Mario 64 still excels today is in that sense of freedom that I talked about earlier. I love how you only need 70 stars in order to beat the game, and I enjoy the fact that I can clear out just about every level in one large swoop, or I can totally just hop around between them if I feel like it. I appreciate having the option to not even touch f***ing Rainbow Ride, thank God. And while the controls are definitely lacking, they really do provide that same feeling of being able to just dick around and find weird ways to travel. Something that truly feels unique to this game, only being surpassed by later 3D Marios for me. But I really do believe that if Mario 64 is gonna survive the test of time, and Nintendo wants to feature it in any way other than cheap virtual console re-releases, it's really gonna need some more fine-tuning than just making the game's UI look a little better. Look, I know I said I'm a stupid purist, and I know I complained about 64DS, but I respect that game, damn it. It tried new things and improved on quite a few aspects of the original. It took risks. It included Wario! With 64DS, Nintendo needed to prove that their newest handheld was powerful, so they shoved a home console game on it and added in new content. And that's really cool. It might not be my favorite way to play 64, but I'm glad it exists. But with the 3D All-Stars collection, this quote-unquote celebration of Mario's 3D history, except for 64DS and Galaxy 2 and 3D Land, which all never happened, what are you talking about? They absolutely half-assed it in every way. To reiterate, Super Mario 64 is one of the best and most important games of all time that inspired just about all future 3D platformers, but that doesn't change my belief that it's just so dated by today's standards, so flawed in a lot of small but fundamental ways. And it doesn't need to be, so allow me to introduce a new segment I'd like to call, here are some things Nintendo could have done to polish up Super Mario 64 for the 3D All-Stars collection without having to completely rework the game or anything too major like that. Let me start with something I haven't really word vomited about yet, the camera. I know that Mario 64's camera is monumental and set the blueprint for just about all open world cameras moving forward, but it's gotta be spruced up. Even if they can't make it as functional as Mario Odyssey's or anything, just fix up the way it controls, make the preset camera angles more usable. I don't know how, but just make it work better. Next, the levels. Look, at the end of the day, it wouldn't be possible to fix a lot of the problems with these levels and the stars within them without having to rebuild things from scratch, but simple changes could go a long way to improving the overall experience. Add some cracking textures to that breakable wall in Womp's Fortress, move around the secret coins in the pyramid, add a fucking platform to the bottom of TikTok Clock like 64DS did. These are all small tweaks that would make the game that much better without radically changing it, and hell, let these new changes be optional so stupid purists like me still have the opportunity to play the original game warts and all if we want to. Tighten up Mario's controls, especially his wall jump and the way he turns ever so slightly based on improvements made in Sunshine and Odyssey especially, and again, make these changes optional. Options are good, options make everybody happy. Options! Add backwards long jumping back in, please. Seriously, I finally just learned how to do it. Please give it back to me so I can feel like a big strong boy again. Make Bowser look a little bit less like a hideous monstrosity. This one is self-explanatory. Get rid of blocky low poly Mario and improve the draw distance for items like coins. Seriously, the 100 coin stars are some of the best parts of the entire game, but collecting them is a lot harder when you can't see a coin if it's more than a solid 2 feet away from you. Last and most importantly, let us control the cannons with gyro aiming. Not because aiming is super difficult or anything, but just because it'd be really neat. Despite my critical tone, I want to remind you all that I started off this video by gushing about Super Mario 64. I do truly love this game, but as time has gone on and my nostalgia wears thinner and thinner and Nintendo feels compelled to re-release this old game without even so much as shining up poor Mario's shoes, I do feel my adoration slowly fading away. Super Mario 64 is a masterpiece of its time. By today's standards, it's a decently solid 3D platformer with more than a few problems, but that's all it really is anymore, and in my opinion, that's incredibly unfortunate. I will always love Super Mario 64 because I grew up with it, and because it's fun, and because it makes me happy, but none of these things are objective fact, and none of these things can band-aid up the bigger problems that it has. And to be totally fair, none of my critiques are objective fact either. I mean, tons of people still fully love this game despite any issues that I may have with it, and it's still hot in the speedrunning community, which is all really great. I want people to play and enjoy this game forever. But with the release of Super Mario 3D All-Stars, Nintendo continues their trend of generally treating their massive, monumental back catalog with contempt at worst and indifference at best, not counting the 3D Zelda remakes for the most part. And unfortunately, Super Mario 64 suffers the most for it, and it manages to feel like a timeless game that's still falling victim to time. Does that make any real sense? No, not really, but that's the best way I can describe it. Yada yada yada. Point is, I love the game, flaws and all, but that doesn't erase its many flaws. And speaking of games that I love that are riddled with flaws, next time on the Die Super Show, we will take a look at Super Mario Sunshine, my favorite Mario game of all time. That's right, I'm one of those degenerate freaks, and I do not care. Ha ha! Bye bye!